On April 16, 1789, George Washington packed his bags at Mount Vernon. He wasn't happy about it. In his diary, he wrote that he felt like a culprit who was going to the place of his execution. Think about that. The man had done what no one in history had ever done before. He won a revolution, and then he just walked away from power. He wanted to be a farmer, to live out his days in peace. But the country he had saved was already falling apart, and everyone knew he was the only man who could hold it together. So he traveled to New York to become the first president of the United States. But here's the thing, there was no manual. This is the history of the reluctant king, how Washington invented the presidency 1789 to 1797. There were no rules. Every single thing he did, every time he bowed or signed a paper or even threw a dinner party, he was setting a precedent for every president who would follow. He was walking a tightrope. If he acted too much like a king, the revolution would have been for nothing. But if he acted too weak, the new government would collapse before it even started. Welcome to Part 5. This is the first presidency. The first major problem Washington faced wasn't a foreign army. It was his own friends. He assembled a cabinet of the smartest men in America, a team of rivals. He appointed the brilliant Alexander Hamilton to run the economy and the equally brilliant Thomas Jefferson to handle foreign policy. On paper, it was a dream team. In reality, it was a disaster. Hamilton and Jefferson didn't just disagree. They despised each other. Their visions for America were polar opposites. Hamilton wanted a strong central government, a national bank, and an economy built on manufacturing and trade. He essentially wanted America to look a lot like Britain. Jefferson, on the other hand, wanted a weak central government, no national bank, and a nation of independent farmers. He wanted America to look like, well, America. Washington spent his days feeling like a referee in a cage match between these two giants. Their constant fighting gave birth to the very first American political parties, Hamilton's Federalists and Jefferson's Democratic Republicans. The ink on the Constitution wasn't even dry, and American politics had already devolved into a bitter, toxic feud. But the most immediate threat to the new nation wasn't brewing in a cabinet meeting. It was erupting in the mountains of western Pennsylvania to pay off the massive debt from the Revolutionary War. Alexander Hamilton pushed through a new tax on whiskey. Now, for the farmers living on the frontier, whiskey wasn't just a drink. It was money. It was their currency. They couldn't haul bulky sacks of corn over the mountains to sell, so they distilled it into a much more portable and valuable product. So what did they do when the government tried to tax it? Exactly what they had done to the British a decade earlier. They rebelled. They refused to pay. They tarred and feathered tax collectors. They burned down buildings. They raised liberty poles and openly talked about seceding from the United States. This was the Whiskey Rebellion, and it was the first real test of the new government's authority. If the government couldn't even collect a simple tax, it was powerless. It didn't really exist. Washington had a choice. He could negotiate, try to find a compromise, or he could show overwhelming force. He chose force. At 62 years old, the President of the United States put his old Continental Army uniform back on. He climbed onto his horse and personally rode out to lead 13,000 troops into Pennsylvania. This is the only time in American history that a sitting president has led an army in the field. And when the rebels saw him, George Washington, the living legend, riding toward them at the head of an army bigger than the one he led against the British, the rebellion just melted away. They didn't even put up a fight, they ran. Washington had made his point, loud and clear. You can vote to change a law you don't like, but you cannot pick up a gun to break it. By the end of 1796, Washington was exhausted. He was being viciously attacked in the press. He was getting old. Everyone just assumed he would serve as president for life, just like a king. But then he did the most radical, most revolutionary thing of his entire career. He wrote a farewell address, said goodbye to public life, and simply went home. By stepping down, Washington taught the world the single most important lesson of being a republic. Power is not something you own. It's something you borrow from the people, and you have to give it back. In that farewell, he also warned us, He predicted that political parties would one day tear the country apart. He warned that getting entangled in foreign wars would drain our nation's strength. Look around today. It seems we didn't listen very well. History keeps repeating itself because we so often fail to learn the lessons the first time. Our education system today often sanitizes the past. It removes the grit, the difficult choices, and the hard truths about leadership. Our systems for supporting veterans are failing the men and women who serve, just like the Continental Congress failed the veterans of 1776. We have to do better. We have to be the ones who actually learn from our history. If you want the unfiltered truth and the kind of tactical history that I just can't fit into a 10-minute video, I invite you to join my Substack called Veteran Perspectives. This is where we get into the raw reality of our history and talk about how we can start fixing the broken systems in our schools and our government today. It's not for everyone. It's for those who want the unvarnished truth. Check the link in the description to learn more. Join the platoon. I'll see you there.